Alright guys, the balance update to Silver Surfer and to Zabu has just dropped, and we're going to talk about the changes and give you kind of a brief overview of what I think and what happened. Moreover, I'm going to give you guys two very experimental, don't get mad at me if they suck, decks to kind of get started with the experimentation of figuring out the new Surfer and the new Zabu. I already have the new Surfer one up there. I was going to not show it, but I'm like, you know what, if people want to see the list, I'll just show them right off the bat. So let's get started. A little less of a formal video here, and I just want to kind of talk to you about what's going on. Now, first of all, Glenn Jones did an absolutely amazing job here. Let's give kudos to the development team for legitimately taking a second, and more than a second, to sit down and actually really write their thoughts about these balance changes, their approach to them, and why, they have done what they've done, because I think that's really valuable, and very few development teams go through this much communication, so I think we're really blessed to have this here. And this is also the first over-the-air style update that isn't like a formalized patch, so they're obviously experimenting with a new style of technology that allows them to modify the game in a more fluid way. This is obviously not their preferred way to do it, but obviously they needed to fix up Zabu and Silver Surfer, and rightfully so. Now, one thing that is mentioned here is the idea that they want the game to have an interesting metagame texture. The idea of releasing cards one at a time throughout the weeks is kind of like the idea of kind of keeping the metagame on its toes, but obviously that wasn't what we were seeing. Zabu and Silver Surfer had completely dominated the meta for the most part, and now we're probably going to see Shuri dominate the meta. But anyways, Silver Surfer and Zabu were clearly extremely strong, and I'm not going to read every single word. I'll let you pause and read through it as you wish, but the idea here is that they want a diverse metagame, and that clearly wasn't happening. Anybody that was climbing ranks clearly saw that we were facing Zabu list after Zabu list after Zabu list, turn 3 Zabu snap, and it was a very non-engaging way to play the game. And then what we also note here is that they're obviously, when they're balancing, they're not just looking at the performance of any individual card. Now, obviously that's important, right? The performance of a card is critical. However, it's important to understand that the clusters of cards that work with the cards are kind of what really impact the balance. For instance, with the case of Silver Surfer, Silver Surfer itself was extremely strong. Giving the +3 benefit across all 3 costs was just an immensely powerful card, so the change had to be made to bring down that immense impact. With Zabu, it wasn't as much Zabu as it was the cluster of cards that it activated. The idea of being able to play 3-4 drops on turn 6 is insane. The idea of being able to play Spider-Man and Absorbing Man together on turn 5 and completely shut 2 lanes down in a game where you have to win 2 lanes by turn 6 is insane. So it was the cluster of cards that really impacted Zabu. In my opinion, I think Zabu got hit way harder with the nerf than Silver Surfer did. I think there's still a very viable Silver Surfer list, and you're looking at one right now. I really just think that, I've been saying this forever. I really think that you just Killmonger Nova, you find other ways to add value. Daredevil Professor X on turn 5, so you don't necessarily need the Sarah. You gotta find other ways to secure value in these lists. You can't just rely on Silver Surfer. And I like that. The major thing to note here is that obviously these changes are pretty huge. Let's talk about Zabu first. Actually, before we say that, I like the note here about how the decision to nerf these cards wasn't taken lightly. They want to protect the gameplay, they want to conserve the integrity of the game, but obviously these are cards that people just bought. These are cards that people are just acquiring through the Pool 5 acquisition model. These are cards that free-to-play players have not really had a chance to play with very much, whereas paid players had them in a completely broken state for the last few games, right? Few months, sorry. So, naturally, the idea of nerfing them as they enter the free-to-play kind of scene kind of feels terrible, but at the same time you got to protect the integrity of the game. I think they were in a damned if they do and damned if they don't situation. If they nerf it immediately just before it goes out to the free-to-play crowd, then the free-to-play players are obviously annoyed because it was overpowered for the entire paid segment. And the other side to it is if you nerf it while it's people just paid for it, people who just paid for the card are like, hey, I just paid money and now I have a weaker card. That's not cool. So it's a really weird, tricky spot that obviously this is the first time I think they've really encountered this. We had Wave and Daredevil, but they weren't meta defining and game breaking the way Silver Surfer, in particular Zabu, was. So let's talk about these changes quick. So basically what you've got here is Zabu saying that the individual card performance is decent, but not actually that great. Once again, it's the cluster of cards that makes Zabu so good. The idea of basically being able to do all these incredibly broken things with Moon Girl, with, with Absorbing Man, Spider-Man, and stuff, like obviously Rock Slide was unseen, and then now all of a sudden you're creating a ton of disruption with a 4/6. Insane, right? Not to mention Darkhawk, which is insane as well. So basically, the idea with Zabu was like that cluster of cards. So Zabu goes from a 3/2 that brought the full cross cards down by 2, so they cost 2 energy, to a 2/2 where you only reduce the cost by 1. Now, this is pretty interesting because, first of all, in traditional Zabu list, you had to wait till turn 3 to draw the card until its impact was felt. Now, you really can't depend on it as much because, like, are you really going to have Zabu in your opening hand, or you're going to draw it with that 1 extra draw? The percentage goes way down, and it's the reason why I thought Silver Surfer was always a more consistent deck, because you had 6 turns, theoretically, to draw Silver Surfer until you really needed it, whereas now Zabu, you got 2. I think this is really damning for Zabu. I'll show you the list that I kind of like brainstormed quickly, but like I think the idea of using Zabu with cost reduction in a Devil Dinosaur based deck with Quinjet, Sentinel, Storm Juggernaut, which I still think is really good, in conjunction with the Moon Girl, White Queen, and Zola play, I think was cool. I like the idea of running She-Hulk here because She-Hulk gives you a lot of straight up value, because with She-Hulk, if you're not ever playing mana efficient, because obviously with Zabu, you can't, with a Zabu turn 2, you can't guarantee you're going to have those draws. And so I think She-Hulk was good because with Chavez, you do reduce the opportunity. You increase, the opportunity to draw the card. I think She-Hulk was a more natural fit, but realistically, you want a Devil Dinosaur Zola. She-Hulk's a backup plan if you're off curve. I think Storm Juggernaut helps secure one of the lanes, whereas what you want to do there is you just want to win and trade with the Devil Dinosaur, right? So I think that's kind of the play here, but realistically, I think this card's really awkward, and I really wanted to include Sentinel with a Quinjet, because when you play Zabu, the new Zabu, where basically 4 cost cards are reduced to 1, what that basically means is that you have opportunities to play multiple 2 costs like Sentinel in conjunction with a 4 like White Queen or Moon Girl or whatever, right? So you're able to kind of squeeze in more 1 cost cards to kind of smooth your curve. So like, that's kind of my thought process around why Sentinel's important and why Devil Dinosaur would probably be valuable here. But realistically, I think this is a pretty huge nerf. Like, I still think there's going to be good builds. And again, this is like, the patch just dropped. So what the hell am I, like, this is very experimental. But I think that Zabu got hit way harder than Silver Surfer. Because when we talk about Silver Surfer basically goes from what they said was basically the best card, one of the best cards in the game consistently as a single card performance. It basically goes from a 3 cost 0 power to a 3 cost 2 power that does +2 across the board. This is kind of important because with the Silver Surfer list, the real problematic card honestly was probably Brood. But what you just need to do now is you need to find another +1 to kind of solve that drop in power. Nova Killmonger does that, and I've been talking about this for months. Nova Killmonger does that, right? I also like the idea of a Daredevil Professor X combination instead of Sarah Surfer, because if you have Brood, you can Brood in Silver Surfer, and that's still a massive lane, because remember, you basically lost 3 power off of the Brood, right, from the proc of Silver Surfer, but you gain 2 back. So if you do something like if you set up a lane with Storm, Juggernaut, whatever, you can easily win that lane. And then you have another situation where you can Daredevil into Professor X, win that lane, and turn 6, just Brood Silver Surfer in that one lane. And it's still almost the same amount of power. Not quite, but almost, because playing the 2 in conjunction with each other for a 4-card lane still gives you the 2+ power from Silver Surfer itself. So I actually think that this is a pretty good list to get you started. The Zabu list, definitely not nearly as confident. I think Zabu got hit way harder. But changing Silver Surfer to a 3/2, I honestly think doesn't destroy the card at all. You might even see some design landscapes where people want to do like Blue Marvels, or they want to do, Wongs. That could be very interesting too. Perhaps you see a deck where you have Zabu so you can get Wong out early so you can Silver Surfer. There's so many different options now that Zabu is actually less expensive, but I do ultimately think that if you're going to try one of them, I do think Silver Surfer is a little more interesting. With that being said, guys, again, very experimental decks. More videos will be coming out soon. The patch just dropped. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for your support, and we'll see you in the next Marvel Snap video.